I know you think, oh, I'm just here. I just got here. I don't really know what's going on. There's an ownership bias because a lot of the people that have worked and even to this day still work in the Hamilton County Courthouse, for example, they're used to this. This is their world. I think so when you try to change it, that's very difficult.
That scares people, and people they fear the unknown.
Having to do the IT work, which is generally the easy part.
That's the easy part. That's what that's the people got to understand.
The technology is the easy part these days, but training the people how to think about what they're doing and how to rethink what their jobs look like, that's the hard part. When I thought of what it meant to help people, I really thought about like a tactile way. A week later, got a letter saying, we don't have any money, we're not hiring freeze. Good luck with the rest of your life. We can teach people how to use the technology, but they have to be open to the idea of being taught.
Yeah.
And they had to cut 50% of that stuff. And so the idea of any change is frightening to some people. The stakes could not be higher when you come to the courthouse. And the law at its core is meant to work for people, but a lot of times it's not enough to truly protect people. So much of what happens at the courthouse are really truly just inefficiencies. If Google was a little bit better, it could have gotten you the answer.
Welcome to Disruption Now. I'm your host and moderator, Rob Richardson. You know, we have this podcast because we're all about trying to show the power of emerging technology to do good, to create impact in the world, not just to, make profit for a few people. And so our goal here is to show how that can happen in policy, how that can happen in government, and how you as regular individuals do have the power. So that's what we're about. But as always, we ask, if you get a chance, please subscribe. In order for more people to know about disruptors, they have to be a subscriber. So if you're one of the 90% of us that watch and listen and aren't a subscriber, I am talking to you. Sign up, become a disruptor. Of course, you can sign our newsletter. We have weekly trends where we talk about the latest in AI and emerging tech and how you can change the world. But going back to our guest here, today I have Pavan Parikh, who is the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts. And that sounds like a boring position. And it kind of is a little bit, but day to day. But it has some really large impact, at least on our county. And everywhere you have a clerk of courts, it's where all the back end stuff happens for the court system. When you have a criminal trial, when you're going through a child custody, when you're going through a divorce. Hopefully, you're not going through one of those. I've been through one; they're not fun. But no matter what, if you have to do anything in the court system, you have to go through the clerk of courts. So you can imagine that's a lot of opportunity for innovation and opportunity to use technology to help people. But there are barriers in doing that because when people are used to doing things, they want to keep doing it the same way, which is the definition of insanity according to Einstein. But welcome to government and welcome to Disruption Now. But we have a disruptor with us on, Pavan. Pavan, it's an honor to have you on, brother.
Thank you so much, brother. Good to be here.
Yeah. So, you could have done a lot of things in your life.
I did a whole bunch of things before I did this.
You did. And I want to talk about some of that. What in the world drew you to do the craziness of just public service in general? Like it takes a special person, and I'm a person that's ran for office, so that's not a slight at him. I'm just talking about the obvious. But what drew you to want to actually serve and help? Because you have done other things, you could be doing other things, but you're doing this. What moved you to do what you're doing right now?
Well, I think I always, even growing up, wanted to build myself towards doing some type of career that involved helping people. What I thought that would look like going into college is very different than what it had turned out.
That's how it usually works.
So when I thought of what it meant to help people, I really thought about like a tactile way of helping people. And
sure.
So I really thought going into college that I was going to end up doing something like medicine.
Oh, really?
Where you are helping people very much one-on-one and just, intimately with them and the most important thing in their life, which is their health. But then I think for a lot of us, things change, circumstances change, priorities change, but also the world changes around us. And so September 11th happened my second week of college.
Oh, wow.
And when you think about the cultural implications of what that meant for American society, global society.
What were you doing at the time?
What was I doing at the time? I was sleeping.
You were in college, yes.
No, but it was interesting. So I went to Xavier for college, and we had gotten a new president, and that day was already scheduled to be a day off because it was his inauguration.
Right.
So a lot of us were out the night before, and a lot of us kind of slept in that morning. And I remember one of my roommates grabbed me by my neck and pulled me out into the living room and be like, hey, you got to see what's happening right now. But it really refocused a lot of us, I think, even in our society, around why government matters, why law and policy matters. I think until that point, the 90s, it was a good time. There wasn't a whole lot of conflict going on. We were distracted by trivial things. So I think growing up in that environment and in high school, the idea was, if you want to help people, there's a way to do that, and it's through something like healthcare and medical services. What you realize very quickly after that event, and the ripple effects of that event, was law and policy matters.
Yeah.
And that how we access systems matters. Who is represented in the system, who is represented in the room when you're making these major decisions really, really matters. And so then I started finding myself being much more interested in law, and decided to shift gears and go to law school.
9/11 was the catalyst, huh? Really?
I think when you really think back on it, that was a major shift that happened, and maybe not in that moment, but when you think of how it just reordered society and how all of us started paying much more attention to government, because it was having a much more greater impact in our daily lives.
Yeah.
So I think that if you really want to go back to the genesis of why, that is a pivotal moment, but it's not everything. It's not the entire reason. So you start thinking about, well, how is life affected by that? And I started realizing, you can help a lot of people in a lot of different ways. It's not just this one narrow scope of what you can do. So law became very interesting to me, because I realized that you can help people on a certain level at scale. And then I started thinking about, well, what do I want to do in the law? And I went to law school, honestly, trying to kind of combine both. I was like, well, I had this background in medicine. I've worked in hospitals. I have this background in healthcare. And I want to combine that with these mechanisms that I see, instead of physically helping people, helping them through policies and stuff. So I thought I was going into more of a health administration, public health type of thing. And in fact, that's why I chose the law school I went to, because they were really strong healthcare law program.
Right.
And then I got about a year in, and I took a criminal law class, and I was like, I want to do this. I want to be in a courtroom. I want to be an advocate. I really want to focus on advocacy, which was great to have that clarity, because I was kind of just floating through, not really sure exactly why I wanted to do what I wanted to do, or exactly what I wanted to do. And then I had that clarity. But then as things happen, talking about external forces, I ended up graduating law school in 2009, which was a really bad year to graduate anything, because the economy had then completely collapsed the fall of my third year of law school. So what I thought I was going to be doing, I thought I was going to be working at a prosecutor's office out in Arizona. And that was the place I did my summer internship, my second summer, had a great experience. I wanted to do that, wanted to be in court every day.
Sure.
Moved out to Arizona, took the bar exam. A week later, got a letter saying, we don't have any money, we're in a hiring freeze. Good luck with the rest of your life.
Oh, wow.
And that shifted me back to Ohio.
Yeah.
So like, even being back here, this is all luck, right? There's only so much you can really plan on, and then you just got to make the best of those opportunities.
Yeah, I really think, Pavan, if, growing up during these times, these many people from different generations have like one pivotal moment within their whole generation. If it was World War II, if it was Vietnam for, some of the baby boomers, but, for like millennials and now starting to be Gen Zers, like we've had a whole bunch of pivotal moments. It's the usual.
I'm ready for precedented times.
Yes.
I'm getting tired of unprecedented times.
Yes.
It's kind of been the story of being an elder millennial.
That's the life, right? And we're going through unprecedented times when it comes to technology as well. Right. And, we've seen a lot of how AI is being used by government in ways that I don't agree with, and I'm sure you don't agree with. And I think it's made people resistant to actually adopting AI to some extent, right? Sure. I think people think there's one ideological view of how technology should be implemented, because, kind of right now there's a dominant narrative about the current occupant of the White House and how things are going and what technology looks like. So at a local level, you've been trying to really move the whole system forward with the clerk of courts, because it's not just you, but really a lot of Hamilton County is really kind of ancient in its approach. Walk with me. What surprised you most when you tried to just even tackle this problem? Like, what surprised you most about the reaction, the culture, in any way, both good or bad?
Well, even before getting to that, what surprised me most, so when I first moved back to Hamilton County in Ohio, I worked briefly at the courthouse for a judge at that point in time. And that was back in 2010, 2011. So when I came in and took over this job at the end of 2021, when I walk back into this building and I start seeing the systems that we're using, and they're the exact same systems we were using in 2010, 2011. And even back then, they were antiquated.
Right.
So my first reaction was, oh, we're still doing this. Okay. And then as I started learning more about the operations of our organization, I realized how paper driven we still were. And then 2021, now 2025, almost 2026, I realized that there was a lot of work to be done. What I had assumed, naively so, was that there would be a groundswell of support for the idea that, hey, if we can focus on automation and digitization, everyone's life gets easier. We reduce some of the lag between processing paperwork. We reduce some of the repetitive parts of the job, so people can then focus much more on the customer service aspect of their jobs instead of stamping pieces of paper and then printing them off and then stamping them again and then scanning them and then physically walking them around the building, right? Little things that in 2021, 2025, all of this can be done by automated systems and should be being done by automated systems. Because the other thing is, every time a person touches that piece of paper, there is a risk. There is a risk that they may misplace it. Every time a person changes something on a piece of paper, anytime a person re-inputs data into a computer system, there is an opportunity for data integrity issues. There's an opportunity for them to accidentally fat finger a number or a name. And then all of a sudden you've got major issues, which all could have been resolved by a single point of entry that takes that information, inputs it, and you have controls around that data and information. So my thought was, okay, this seems simple. People should want to be able to do this because it will free up time for them. And oh boy, was I wrong. Because that involved convincing people, one, that what we had wasn't the best possible thing. And there's an ownership bias because a lot of the people that have worked, and even to this day still work in the Hamilton County Courthouse, for example, they grew up in this system.
Yeah.
They went to UC for law school or Chase for law school. And then their first job was working at the public defender or prosecutor's office. And then they got their way to the bench. And then they've stayed on the bench. And they haven't practiced anywhere else. They haven't seen other things. So not having that breadth of vision and opening that aperture as to what all is out there, they're used to this. This is their world. I think so when you try to change it, that's very difficult.
I think that's part of it, Pavan. I also think there's not enough experience. Yes, they don't have a lot of real world experience on other things. I won't call it real world. Their experience they have is real. It's just like everybody's experience, limited, right? And so when you've had to design something for people, when you have to understand these nerdy terms, UI, UX, user interface, user experience, you have to then see, like, and this goes for engineers, lawyers, people say it's easy for me, so they think it's easy for everybody. No, the answer is it's either easy or it's not. There's no in between. Either everything is complicated or everything is simple. And as I tell people, in order to implement any type of change, and we're talking about technological change, but you're still talking about getting people's buy-in. You are doing change management, which is why it's hard.
Well, and I think part of it is who's the end user, right? Because everything in our systems have been built around the end user being the people internal to the system. So
exactly.
What is convenient for the clerk's office? What is convenient for the judges, for the prosecutor's office? But at the end of the day, and this is where I think our office has taken a 180 shift in how we're approaching problems and how we're looking at how we operate and what our solutions are, is none of those people hired me. They hired me to the extent they're one of the 830,000 people that live in Hamilton County. So my responsibility isn't necessarily to the system. My responsibility is to the people of Hamilton County. And so because of that, my end user is that person that is coming into this building that isn't being paid to be here, that needs access to justice, to information, to utilize their constitutional rights in this country to seek redress for harms that have happened to them. That's who my end user is. So what we have been focusing on is how do we reframe the narrative internally, and how us as a system start looking at systemic issues as it's not good enough for it to be convenient for us. It has to be convenient to that person that is outside of this building and that only has to come here because they're being summoned to court or something bad has happened to them. They're seeking that redress.
So you have a vision, and you've had unexpected resistance because, like you said, naivete. We all think because it's helping people, it's something everybody would want to do. The truth is, if people aren't used to that, they feel ownership bias, and they want to continue to do what they've done. I think there's some fear, something I talk about often, that there's a lot of fear, particularly with AI, but with any technology. But I think AI is unique in that it's moving so fast, it's so dynamic, and it's so new in how we actually use technology. In fact, that you can have like a more than an assistant, an agent working with you. That scares people, and people they fear the unknown. They fear their job being replaced. So you've got the resistance on one end, the people that are just against you, and just because they don't want it. How do you, though, manage everyone else to keep the culture moving forward, to see that this is an opportunity for them and not a threat to them?
Well, I think that's part of it. You have to reframe it as an opportunity, because also it's inevitable. And I think that's part of how, when we try to build some of this change, we try to remind people we can't just put our head in the sand. We can try that. Yeah. At some point, this is going to, in the same way that at some point the internet came and people had to adjust. I would rather us focus on how we can integrate it at the beginning and start making small adjustments, instead of having to do a massive overhaul in 10 years, which will be much more disruptive, much more expensive, much more harder to understand. And we are going to be so far behind where we need to be. Right now, we are behind where we need to be. But as we make those incremental changes, and a lot of it is mindset, right? I mean, we can teach people how to use the technology, but they have to be open to the idea of being taught. And that is, I think, one of the big things we have focused on as far as bringing new talent into our organization. How we operate is truly unique. You could do the exact same job in a different courthouse in this state, and we'd still have to retrain you and teach you exactly how to do it for Hamilton County and how Hamilton County works. So that's the immediate micro skill. But the attitude of, I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to look at how I can utilize technology. I'm willing to look at problems and look for innovations and improvements and try to find solutions. And to, as an organization, look at new people coming in and say, you have an asset we don't have, which is perspective. I've been here almost 4 years. I know that there are things that I do in my daily life that I just assume this is the way we have to do it because this is the way we've been doing it for the last 4 years. And that is a huge risk and danger. So one of the things I try to tell new employees as they come in is, I know you think, oh, I'm just here. I just got here. I don't really know what's going on. Why would anyone listen to me? Well, most of you have had careers in other places doing other things. Bring that experience to this. You've been a user of this information. Bring that experience to this job and help us be better by showing us the gaps that we don't even know that we have. And I think as we do that, as we build that momentum of bringing more people in that think that way, then I think it becomes infectious across the organization and across all the other organizations we have to necessarily work with on a daily basis, because people are going to see that we are being much more global in our problem-solving approach, and that we are finding solutions to problems that other people had. And they didn't even know that it was a problem. Yeah. But we are trying to be collaborative and trying to find ways to solve as many problems as we can.
Now, you worked on that internally with your staff, and I believe out of the county, I think the clerk of courts has the largest amount of employees, doesn't it?
So we are number two as far as single elected official offices. The sheriff's office has more.
Okay, the sheriff's office.
Because they also run the jail in addition to the patrols. But other than that, we are number two. And I think this is also one of the reasons why internally people are concerned about change, because a lot of people that have been in the office and have been there for a long time, they also lived through that 2008, 2009 recession, where the office was twice the size it is now. Wow. There were almost 400 people in this office, and they had to cut 50% of that staff. And so the idea of any change is frightening to some people because they were there through that problem. What I try to explain to people is the reason why you had that drastic of an issue is because we weren't doing that incremental change management. We weren't thinking about what are the problems and solutions that we can implement. And so it wasn't, as somebody retired or somebody moved on to a different job, hey, do we really need to replace them one-to-one? It was, we have all this extra weight in the system that we got to get rid of. Our goal is to not ever get to that again, that every time that we're making a personnel decision, a technology decision, an operations decision, we are trying to think through not only how does this impact us right now, right here today, but what are the second, third, fourth order effects of this to the organization, but also temporally over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So sounds like you're thinking like a startup. So let me kind
That's probably dangerous.
Yeah, it's a little bit like if you were a startup, let's say the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts, how you want to eventually reimagine it. What would your pitch be in terms of what is the problem you're trying to solve and why does it matter?
Well, I think the why is very simple because so much is at stake when somebody comes to the courthouse. It is potentially someone's liberty that's at stake. It is money that's at stake. It's peace of mind. There's so much that is at stake. Whether you are someone that's been accused of doing something wrong or you're the victim of something wrong has been done to you, the stakes could not be higher when you come to the courthouse. And the law at its core is meant to work for people, but a lot of times it's not enough to truly protect people. And so what we have to do is fill in those gaps. We have to ensure that there is equal access, that there is equal opportunity to be able to exercise your rights and defend yourself against people trying to exercise their rights against you. And whether those are other individuals, whether that's the government, because it's really hard to hold the government accountable. And that's quite frankly, look at the Bill of Rights. Our entire system of government was built around the idea of we need to have as a foundational document something that says we need to be able to hold the government accountable and we need to protect individuals against abuse of governmental power.
Yeah.
And that's what's at stake for so many people when they come into the courthouse. But if we aren't, again, thinking of the end user, of the people that are coming there, that are being forced to come there, and we're only thinking about the convenience of the people, those of us who are paid to be in the building, that is a huge problem because we don't face the consequences.
Yes.
The people that really face the consequences of if the system is or is not just, if it is structured justly, if it is operated justly, those are not the people in the building. Those are the people coming through. Those are our customers. Those are our clients, or whatever you want to call them. But that's who we are responsible to. And without drastically changing how we are oriented to focusing on that, there is so much risk that people are going to experience incredible hardship that they shouldn't.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think it's, I want to focus on the opportunity here with AI about really administering justice. Not sure if you saw this story that came out a couple weeks ago, but there was a family who lost a loved one in the hospital. Their loved one was in the hospital for about 4 hours and passed away. And the hospital sent them a nice note in the form of $162,000 bill, right? And the family was obviously stressed out, but one member of the family took a look at it and knew very well how to leverage AI, and so what they did is they challenged how the billing was done. They challenged the coding in the billing, and to make a very long story bearable, they cut off about $162,000 of that bill, right? And I say this for a reason. They're coming back to this because I think people, need to think about. We think about a lot of the bad sides of AI, and there are some. There need to be policy. At the same time, there are a lot of benefits and there are ways you can use it for your strategic advantage. specifically for most of human existence, information has been hoarded and protected by large institutions. And most of these things are foreign to people, which is why you need to hire people just to be able to defend yourself. You still will need to do that at some level, but there's a lot more power because information is democratized. Right. My question to you is, what role, particularly being in the court system, do you see, in a perfect world, what role would AI play in empowering the everyday individual that goes through the courthouse?
I mean, I think once we work through the regulatory structure, I think we'll have a huge role. I think especially when it comes to answering legal questions, there's always going to be that risk that you want to mitigate of unauthorized practice of law, of giving legal advice, especially when there isn't a person on the back end for you to negotiate and talk to and show you evidence to and work through what their experience is. However, so much of what happens at the courthouse are really, truly just inefficiencies. And one of the things that we've tried to do in our office, not using technology, but putting personnel towards a problem, is in building out our help center, where we have attorneys that are there to answer questions and help people through legal issues on civil issues. If it's a criminal issue, if it's a crime, you're entitled to a lawyer. But on civil issues, so evictions, debt collection, perfect example, you are not entitled to legal representation. And a lot of times you just need somebody to explain to you what is going on and what are my next steps. And that particularly is a space where AI is going to be hugely helpful.
Yep.
Because it's not necessarily about giving advice about what to do. It's trying to explain to you, here's what the process is. Here's what's going to happen next. Here are your options for things that you can file next. And then maybe that's the time where you need to go to a help center or an attorney and say, okay, this is what I think my options are. Which one is the best option for this scenario? Because that crosses the line to legal advice. But everything up until that, so much of that work can, I think, truly be done eventually by artificial intelligence that is really helping people with basic wayfinding of what am I supposed to be doing next? Because so many of the questions that we have with that coming to the help center is, hey, I got served this. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. I don't even know what this is. And a lot of that basic information can be taken up by a well-regulated, thought-out, large language model AI that has been trained on also how we do work here in Hamilton County.
Right.
We are such a large institution. There's over 100,000 cases filed in Hamilton County every year, just for courts for which I'm clerk, and I'm not clerk for all the courts. Now, if you do the math on this, we have millions of documents floating around in our system that we could train a large language model to understand what happens in particular here. And then what that does for our staff, for example, and this is where I think people are afraid of AI taking jobs. And my response to that, a lot of it is, and the work that we do in our office, it's not going to take your job. It's going to drastically change how you do your job.
Yeah.
And a lot of what that means is those initial questions that are eating up a 20-minute appointment with an attorney every time, we can take those off.
Exactly right.
So now all of a sudden the people that are coming in, they've already had that initial consultation with the AI. They kind of understand the basics, and they're coming to us with real nuanced issues that they really need to talk to an attorney about. It will free up time for us to focus on that real core customer service mission that we have, instead of just responding to stuff that if Google was a little bit better, it could have gotten you the answer.
Right. No, I think that's a great way of looking at it. And when people have fear of AI replacing them, I get it. It's a legitimate fear. You see all of these headlines with Amazon laid off X amount of people to AI. First of all, some of that is not true. They're doing other things. But some of these companies are doing it that are large, multinational, trillion-dollar companies. What I tell people is government is not a trillion-dollar company, and most companies are not.
Right.
And so what they need to do is figure out how you work with your people. Your middle managers, the people that are on the front lines, are actually your best designers of working with AI.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like,
because they know the processes.
They know the process.
They know the questions. They know the frequently asked questions. They know what's coming through.
And they know the context,
Right.
which is very important, because you can feel like you have the right data, but the context is different for humans sometimes. That's why it can help them make more of those contextual decisions and less of the basic processing information.
Well, and you look at how we are set up. We are still our office still follows very much an ancient model. Where you have people at individual desks that do discrete functions.
Exactly.
Somebody from the public comes in, they want to pay a bond, they got to go to this desk. They want to pay other fees, they got to go to a different desk. They want to file something in civil, they got to go to one desk. They want to file something in criminal, they got to go to another desk.
Exactly.
And that's just in the common pleas realm or the municipal court realm. Not to mention if they went to the wrong floor because they went to the wrong court. Now, what I want to change about how we are structured is to move much more to like a bank teller model, where it's just the next available window. The person from the public comes up and they just go to the next available window. But to be able to do that, we have to build such more robust systems that can handle all the basic stuff, that can handle the basic issues and questions. And that way, like you said, the middle managers that have that contextual knowledge, they are the ones floating around being able to troubleshoot and help out the specific problems that pop up. But if we do this right, and this is the process we're starting to go through now as we're trying to look at new systems to build, if we do this right, 80%, 90% of the things that take up all the time will be automated or be able to be answered in seconds instead of minutes.
Exactly.
And if we do that right, then it frees up all that extra time for our team to be focused on the two things, which are, the customer service and then the quality control. And that is what we need the human brains to be focused on, instead of,
that's right.
I got to take this piece of paper, I got to stamp it, I got to scan it, I got to make 5 copies and move it on.
Yeah. The age, this is how I explain it. When we work with organizations, we have to redesign how we work. It's an infrastructure redesign. It's also a mindset redesign for people, right? Because for most of society, we've had it so we've organized things around processing information.
Right.
We had human beings to have, because it got too complicated to carry so much information. So there's a reason why your system was designed the way it was. It's because that at a time, and most of the time, was the most efficient way, because only so much information could be processed by an individual. That is over now. Like, it is not like processing information is not something you need to hire people for anymore. You can process that information and then it moves to making a decision, but you need people for the context of when the decisions are made, when it's critical, when it moves from just asking a question to this is a critical legal question. People need to be involved in that process. There are certain parts where they have to be involved.
A computer can't be held accountable. A computer can't
That's
be fired,
right. That's right.
There always has to be a person in the decision-making process when a decision is made.
That's right.
And so that is one of the things that we are very cognizant of. And I think your point is well taken about how systems have been structured over time. I'm not blaming people for how we are set up. I think we were set up in a way that made a lot of sense for a long, long time.
Yep.
But we are in this transition period now where we have to reorient how we are set up. And that is everything from physical infrastructure. How are the offices physically laid out? Where do people physically go, to that digital infrastructure, to those systems, and how we think about it. And one of the things that we know when you look at system change and change management, it takes time. So you've got really two options, which is to do that sequentially or to do it concurrently. We have chosen to do some of this concurrently, whereas as we're bringing in new staff and as we're training the staff that we already have, we are doing that change management on the human side. At the same time, we are looking at moving towards new information technology systems. There are some places, and sometimes it makes sense, where you have to build the system first and then train people to the system. But that does extend that change management timeline, because you're having to do the IT work, which is generally the easy part.
That's the easy part. That's what that's the people got to understand.
The technology is the easy part these days, but training the people how to think about what they're doing and how to rethink what their jobs look like, that's the hard part. We're trying to do both of those at the same time. Yeah. And the jury's still out as to whether or not that's going to work. But I think what we've seen right now is it's already working in small ways where staff is feeling empowered to bring up issues, to say, hey, I started asking the question, why do we do this way? And it was very clear, very quickly, there's no real good answer. We've just been doing it that way. And maybe it did make sense 10, 20, 30 years ago, but we have the capacity to, issue a refund quicker, to file this document quicker, to get it up on the internet quicker, to redact information quicker. Then let's do that.
Yes. And the challenge, then I want to move off this point. You talked about change management with people. One of the things that we found working with organizations is you have to, it's less about the tools of the technology. The technology is important, but first really identifying the workflows.
Yes.
What are they actually, right, from beginning to end? Because a lot of times, and this goes from the most simplest of things, right? Let's just take not a government organization. What we've seen is someone that is who is the head of making the brand copy for the whole corporation, right? Or they're in charge of that. There's a process where they just know what good is. They go through something, but you can actually unlock more of that collective intelligence for people to share once you go through and bring context to the AI, and you put a process behind that. That's a simple example, but there's also examples for just how people do a search at the clerk of courts. What is the actual workflow that currently goes right now? What is the workflow when people come into the help center? And people often miss steps, but you can actually you work with your middle managers and have LLMs too work with you to help you unlock what that workflow is. And then you map it into the system.
Right? It's what and why. And I think that we have all been, to the extent we're good at any of this, relatively good at figuring out the what. Okay, this is the step, and then this is the next step, and this is the next step. It's the understanding the why and unpacking the why and realizing sometimes you can skip steps 2 through 3 or 2 through 5 because we just don't need them anymore.
That's right.
They made sense when you had to have people looking over everyone's shoulder 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And this applies in so many different contexts. I'll give you another example. In my previous life, I worked in the banking industry, and I remember being on Capitol Hill talking to members of Congress. And one of the issues that banks were having staffing-wise was there are certain crimes that rendered people ineligible to work in the banking industry, certain convictions. And these were the banks going to Congress. This was J.P. Morgan Chase and Huntington and U.S. Bank going to Congress going, look, guys, we understand why this was the case when the laws were written, because people were handling cash. Nobody handles cash anymore. They're pressing a button, moving dollars around on a screen. So maybe we need some relief from some of this because we're having a workforce issue. Yeah. Because people with basic drug convictions are having trouble getting jobs where we don't have to worry about them taking cash because there's no cash even in the drawers anymore. They're not handling it. And so that's one of those, again, we have to constantly ask these why questions. That law made sense at one point in time. It doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
How are we doing that on a macro level, but also on a micro level into our everyday operations to figure out, are we doing stuff the best way?
Yeah. I mean, you talk about policy and the challenge with policy, how it moves with technology. And we're at a point where it's nowhere close to keeping in alignment with it. And you mentioned earlier when you talked about AI and policy and where you want it to be, my concern is you're not going to get that from the federal government. You're not going to get that from the state. So this is just kind of more of a statement than a question, and maybe I'll turn it into a question. Knowing that likely direction is not going to come, what role do you think you have to play locally in kind of determining policy and practices? Because I feel if you wait until you get clarity, it'll take so much time that you won't be able to use the technology. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, my thought is that, look, at the local level, you're more agile. So if you look at the federal procurement pipeline, getting new pens is going to take years, right? And that's pens, not artificial intelligence, right? So the procurement pipeline is so long and so difficult, and in a lot of ways, the larger of an organization you get, it becomes a detriment as much as an asset because change is hard.
Yep.
At a smaller local organization, we can be much more agile. Yeah. We can try things and we can see if they work, and we can try them at a smaller scale. And if it works at a smaller scale, we can grow it at a larger scale. And it's one of those things where, as a smaller organization in the grand scheme of the world, leadership matters a lot more because you can push through projects. You can focus on what do I think the right things are to do right now. You can try pilot projects if leadership is bought in. And that's not just the elected leadership at the top of an organization or appointed leadership at the top of an organization. It is the entire organization. And I think that once you have that alignment of people all moving in the same direction, big things can happen, and they can happen quickly. But you gotta walk, or you gotta crawl before you walk, right? Yeah. Before you run, you got to start some of these projects on a small micro level to see, is this even viable? And then you can grow it. And so, yes, it is going to be important to have regulatory structures. It's going to be important to have federal standards and state standards. But at the local level, we can be the testing grounds right now to see what works and what doesn't work. And we can use that experience. And because depending on your locality, look, Hamilton County is a large county. You go 3 counties over, you got some smaller counties there. It is just as important for them to be working on these kinds of problems as it is for us, because you are going to see different benefits and different problems when you're dealing with a county of 40,000 people than when you're dealing with a county of 830,000 people. And what I've always said is that my counterparts in smaller counties, they almost operate at an advantage because they're trying to move around in the ocean on a jet ski. Jet ski can turn on a dime.
Right.
If you've got the right leadership. For us here, we are so large and unwieldy and complicated that it's almost akin to the federal government in the extent of, like, we're trying to turn a carrier strike group.
Yeah, yeah.
You need a wide berth, costs a lot more time, costs a lot more money. There's a lot more coordination that needs to happen. So we need to be doing both, because we can't learn lessons from one that will not be applicable to the other.
Correct.
Unless we're all working in this direction. And then once we've done that, we take that information and we keep raising it up layer by layer. And that's how we're going to build a regulatory structure and guidance that really makes sense.
Okay. A couple of rapid fire questions. You've achieved some level of success as you define it with your technology transformation, let's say in 24 months. What will that look like? How will you measure success?
Look, the big thing that we're working on towards right now is rebuilding or buying a new case management system. Our current one was built in the late 90s. It was state of the art at the time. It is no longer state of the art. It doesn't do the things that we need it to do. So again, procurement takes a while, And our hope is in 24 months, we've already got one court almost online. That is an aggressive timeline for a local government. But I think we can get there because of a lot of the work that we've been doing behind the scenes. And I think it's also really important to look at any of these issues, not narrowly about the one issue, and to really take that global view of what are all the different levers of power that we can play with. Law, for example, is not static. If I need to get something changed, I don't necessarily have to only work within the framework of what the law is now. Let's go to the legislature. Let's make our case to them. Let's advocate to them of the law needs to change, and here's why. And maybe we get that. And if we get that, all of a sudden our 5-year time horizon reduces down to a 2-year time horizon because we have much more explicit authority on things we can do or can't do. And we have the support, theoretically, potentially, of the state government to do it.
All right. Random question. What did you want to be when you grew up, and what do you want to be now?
Well, again, I mean, I think at one point I wanted to be an astronaut, but that didn't work. And so when I grew up, I think, again, I wanted to help people. So I thought that the mechanism to do that was to go into something like medicine and help people. The jury is still out on what I want to be when I grow up now. I truly don't know, but I think a mistake a lot of people make is focusing too much on the title or the thing as opposed to what it is that you're trying to achieve. So my goal right now, look, I never thought I'd be in this job. This was not even, if you gave me a list of 100 jobs that I might potentially have, this wouldn't have been on that list even at all. But I love my job because it is taking skills that I've developed and experiences I've had over my life, and I found new ways to apply them in ways that make a meaningful difference in people's lives. So my goal is to try to use the experiences that I have had and the knowledge that I have and the relationships that I have to try to make a meaningful difference to make life better for people. I'm agnostic and open as to what exactly the job is that I can do that in, but that's my guiding principle. Do I think I can do more good? And whatever the next thing is, then maybe I take that opportunity. If I think I would be too hamstrung by other regulations, policies, whatever, then I probably won't.
I think that's very intuitive as we get ready to close. I've been on the path of public service, like you, and didn't ultimately serve. Got over 2 million votes though, right? But I had to just plug that in. But I remember right after my losing that election that I thought was, we were going to win because at that time we thought Ohio was a swing state and we're not. So as we learn,
we'll see.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, we'll see. But so far from 2018 till 2025, it's not been a swing state. And so I had to then reevaluate where I was going to go. Right. And your point is well taken. I found, peace in really understanding that, my value wasn't tied to what I did, but why I did it. Right. So it could change as long as I was figuring out ways to change and have impact in the world. And that brought me into technology and working with, policymakers and also helping the public understand how to use technology. So I think that's a really good point to end on. I know we're in a tumultuous time, to say the least, and people are really uncertain of the future. We don't know fully how AI is going to affect the entire economy. We're obviously in a really unstable time politically. So that gives people anxiety, sure. Right? And I just tell people when you feel these moments, you don't have to be tied to what you do, but what your values are. And you find a way to do that and figure out what you're actually good at too. Because I think some of the most horrible advice is people just say generally focus on what you're passionate about. But if you're passionate about singing and you can't bring up a note, right. You need to do something else, right? But my point is, find that connection to your values and your competency, and there's where you'll find, purpose and impact and opportunity for yourself, and I think that's what you focus on.
And to be open to the opportunities, because I think people do get a tunnel vision that they look at, well, I want this title, I want this thing, and again, it goes back to why. Ask the question, why? Why do you want this thing? And really unpack that, because once you understand that about yourself, it then opens up the opportunity for so many other things, but you've got to keep yourself open to those opportunities and then evaluate them one-to-one. Every time that one comes up, it may make sense. It may not make sense, but it's not necessarily about the money. It's not necessarily about the title. It's about what do you see yourself doing? how does that contribute to your vision of who you want to be in this world, what your legacy wants to be, what you want your legacy to be? And to your point, I think those questions are answered on a foundational level on what are you passionate about? What do you care about? What are your morals and your values? But also, how do you marry those with what are your competencies? So good luck to anybody figuring that out, because I think we're all figuring it out. And that's why you see some people that have a 35-year career at Procter & Gamble retiring like, you know what I want to do? I want to do something completely different.
Yeah.
And then they go and do it, and they have this whole other robust secondary career at their retirement, because maybe it was one of the first times they've stopped and really had that inflection point and thought about to themselves, okay, what am I good at? What do I love? How can I make a difference in the world? What do I want to do? So it's a process, and it's never static. It's always a process. And I think people need to just be more comfortable with that unknown.
Yes, it's the new way of the world, that you have to both be comfortable and change. You have to be comfortable learning and frankly unlearning some things, and that makes you a disruptor. So Pavan, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Rob.
And don't make yourself a stranger, and as always,
Never. You know where to find me.
Absolutely, keep disrupting.